So today's story or reading is based on Daniel chapter 6. We have a new king at the beginning of this story. King Belshazzar isn't the king anymore, and the king in this part of the story is called Darius. Darius became king instead. He wasn't from Babylon, and he didn't know about God either. Daniel was so good that even his enemies couldn't see anything he did wrong. How could it be? It was because Daniel loved God so much. He always wanted to do the right thing and to do what was best for God. King Darius promoted him to be the top man in Babylon. But the people Daniel worked with were jealous of him. They didn't like him getting all the best jobs. And without Daniel doing anything against them, they became his enemies. They wanted to catch him out, and they came up with a horrible plan. As you know, Daniel was great friends with God and talked to him often. And this is what his enemies picked on him with in their plan. We'll have to get him somehow, his enemies schemed. Not to do with his work, though. Daniel is far too good. Not to do with telling the truth. He always does that. They spied on Daniel and realised the only way was to find something to do with his God. Finally, his enemies came up with a sneaky plan. They went to the king and they gushed about how wonderful he was. "You're such an amazing king," they said. "We love you," they said. "Nobody compares to you." And that they had all agreed that he should bring in a new law, that no one should request anything from any god or any man for 30 days, except from him, except from King Darius. Anyone who disobeyed this new law was to be thrown into a pit filled with lions. A very clever plan, and the king liked it. The king signed the order for the plan to be put into action. When Daniel found out about the new law, he went home, and as usual, he knelt down to talk to God in prayer. The Bible says that Daniel did this 3 times a day. Of course, the enemies were watching out for this. Their plan was working. They could almost hear the lions. They went to the king and told him that Daniel was still praying to his God. Now, this wasn't what the king had wanted at all. The king was upset and tried all day to work out how he could get around this law. But he couldn't. He liked Daniel, but it had to be. So Daniel was arrested and thrown into the pit of lions. The king said to Daniel, "You have been faithful to your God, and I pray that he will rescue you." A stone was rolled over the pit of lions, and it was stamped with a seal. The king went home and didn't sleep a wink. First thing the next day, at daybreak, the king got up and ran to the pit. He shouted, "Was your God able to save you from the lions?" Did Daniel respond? "Yes," he said. "God sent an angel to keep the lions from eating me." Oh, the king was so relieved. he gave orders for Daniel to be taken out of the pit. Cover your ears for the next bit if you're a bit squeamish. The king ordered the enemies to be thrown into the pit. The lions pounced on them before they even reached the bottom. After that, the king gave another command, that everyone in his kingdom was to worship and honour the God of Daniel. Another amazing story from Daniel this week and his incredible faithfulness. I did want us to have a little think about about lions though, before I bring a short reflection today. And I have asked my brother if he would answer a few questions about lions for us. My brother is called Harry, and he has worked in South Africa with cheetahs over the past 3 or 4 years. And just last year he worked at Longleat with the carnivores, and so he knows a little bit about lions. So let's just hear from him now, before I bring a short reflection to you. This is Harry, my brother, and he's going to tell us a little bit about lions.
So lions, they tend to live in prides of up to 15, can be slightly more, but the average is about 15. Males tend to look after the pride and the territory of where they are, while the female lionesses go off hunting. Females typically do most of the hunting. That's their role in the family as it stands as a pride. They are nocturnal, so also known as crepuscular, so they hunt dusk till dawn. If you look at them closely whenever you go to a zoo or safari park, or you see them on TV, they have white fur underneath the eyes, so you can so it helps them to see at night. So the moonlight reflects off the white fur back into their eyes, and it gives them better vision. Most nocturnal animals have that. It's not just lions as well, so there's other big cats that have that function as well.
What age do they live to, lions, roughly?
In captivity, you're looking anywhere to about 25 to 30 years potentially. And in the wild, you're looking about 14 to 16 years old.
So, what sort of size are lions? Are they pretty big?
Yeah, males are typically taller than females. Males average around 1.2 metres on all fours, and females are slightly shorter than that.
Wow.
They eat meat, so they are carnivores. So they only eat meat, solid meat diet. They eat zebra, wildebeest, antelope, and different things like that.
Cool. So if a person was to be put in front of a lion,
have absolutely no chance.
Wouldn't stand a chance.
No.
Cool. Well, not cool. Not for them anyway.
Yeah, definitely not.
Anyway, thanks for sharing.
No worries.
Big thank you to Harry for sharing with us there about lions. I obviously talked to my brother quite a lot, and even I still found out stuff that I didn't know about them. I'm amazed at the size of lions, and I had absolutely no idea that they are nocturnal creatures. And so I think that maybe understanding a bit about lions might help us take a slightly deeper or a slightly different look at this story that we've probably heard many, many times before. Throughout this first half of the book of Daniel, we have seen challenge after challenge thrown at Daniel and his friends because they follow God. We have seen them refuse to eat any food that will defile them. We've seen them interpret dreams, say no to worshipping a statue, face a fiery furnace, see writing on a wall and understand it. And every single time, Daniel and his friends prevail over the 3 different kings that we have met, over all of the different idols, over all the different people that worship idols, and over magicians and other advisors Daniel and his friends have prevailed every time. All because they remain true and faithful and obedient to the one true God. And this story is no different. Daniel knew these other men that worked for the king. He would have worked alongside them. He knew that they would have been jealous. He knew that they were setting a trap, and yet he knew he must continue to worship God. He also had to have incredible faith and belief that God would answer his prayers. We just heard in the story that once the new law was signed, even the king himself couldn't undo it. I imagine this was put in place so that whoever the king was would have to think really, really carefully over any legislation they wanted to put in place before enacting it, which King Darius very clearly doesn't do in this story. He is manipulated and coerced by the other advisors, Daniel's enemies, who would have known about this rule and would have known that the king would have no choice. King Darius really liked Daniel, and he was devastated when he realised what he'd done by signing that law off, by putting that law into place, that he had no choice but to throw Daniel to the lions. Daniel's life is in danger, and God miraculously saves him again. Again, we see God protect Daniel. And again, it isn't in the most obvious way. He didn't stop Daniel from being thrown into the pit of lions, just like he didn't stop Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego from being thrown into the fiery furnace. He protected Daniel when he was in the pit of lions, which is incredible, especially given what we have just learned about lions, how big they are, how strong they are, and how actually, in normal circumstances where God hadn't intervened, or nowadays when we see them more in captivity, that they are a nocturnal creature, and so actually they probably would have been awake for the whole time that Daniel was in the lion's den, but because God intervened, they weren't. He answers a prayer again. When he is brought out the next morning, we come to see that God has given Daniel favour, especially in the sight of King Darius. We see in this story another example of Daniel's unfaltering faith. He could have talked to the king and encouraged him not to implement this law in the first place, but he doesn't. He just continues to pray to God 3 times a day, faithfully. I think we have a lot to learn from Daniel and the way that he serves.